All right. Bassist, singer, songwriter, co-founder of Motley Crue, Nikki Sixx has joined us. He has a memoir out. It's called The First 21, How I Became Nikki Sixx, and it is out as you hear this today. It details the first 21 years of Nikki's life, and it's available on Amazon. Good to see you, Nikki.
Good to see you too, man. I am not the singer, though.
Well, not the singer, but you do sing.
I kind of sing.
Yeah,
I'm in the background back there. You can hear me in the background.
Yeah, we all got the Vince Neil part. So the memoir is the first 21 of your life, which a lot of people don't know. I think many people enjoyed The Dirt on Netflix a couple of years ago. They got the whole Motley Crue notion on that, but this is sort of 0 to 21. This is the beginning. So let's start at the beginning. How do you come up?
Okay. Well, the idea, I was working on another book. I really enjoy writing books and doing photography and writing lyrics, kind of just documenting stuff. And we had moved, sold our house in Los Angeles, moved up to Jackson, Wyoming. And I was like sitting out, like just looking at this nature, and literally from where we moved to, right across the mountain is where I grew up as a young kid, over in Idaho. We're in Wyoming, so right over the Grand Tetons. And I started like thinking, like, kind of like where did everybody go? Because as you know, Adam, this business, it gets busy and you are always on the go. And all of a sudden you realize, like, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, in my case, 40 years since I started Motley Crue, had just flashed by like that. And I went in and started calling like back to like my family members and talking about, when I was born, the stories that I heard about my dad, the stories that I heard about my mom, everything wasn't necessarily true. I had a sister who was born with Down syndrome. So we started reconstructing the story through actually people who were still alive, through photos, and started seeing a pattern for me that ended up in self-discovery and discovery of music in the 70s, living in a small town, working on farms. And it's really kind of a precursor to everything that I learned, and eventually being in Los Angeles in the 70s and playing in bands and honing my craft, and how that whole thing happened prior to Motley Crue.
Do you think, and I think you just got 20 years of sobriety, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
It's well documented, your bouts with drugs and heroin and overdosing, I think in 87, and flatlining for a couple of minutes. So you've been there and you've done that. Do you think the new version of you documenting all this stuff, pictures and books and the like, do you think it's in a way a compensation for when you're on drugs, you don't really document anything? Like you just don't remember the tours or the hotels or the women or the gigs or anything. I mean, it really just it essentially erases your memory. Yeah. And this is a way through pictures and through books and through song that you can come back and capture or recapture those memories, or at least a lot of them.
Well, I mean, the Heroin Diaries was an interesting book because I like to write so much. As I was going through this extremely difficult year in my life where I was addicted to heroin, I was documenting every day. And, finding those diaries kind of like opened up my eyes to like what addiction was like, but I had also gotten sober at that point. So we used that as a way to kind of show people how you can get out of addiction into recovery and what recovery looks like. It was really through doing that I started like looking at myself a little deeper, not just as a band member, but as a father, and what I wanted to do with my life. And it's just started this process now where I just really enjoy that self-discovery, which then I roll back into music. When we put 6 a.m. together, the band that did the soundtrack to the Heroin Diaries album, we wrote this song called Life is Beautiful, and it connected with so many people. We played That band's gone out and played so many shows supporting other bands. We remember playing in Japan. There was 100,000 people, and they're all with their hands in the air, like to Life is Beautiful. That song unified people in a positive way, kind of the way Shout at the Devil did for young teenagers. Just it was like, a different kind of unification. And so I've really gotten to enjoy this process.
So let's and Motley Crue has a stadium tour coming up in 2022, and we can
Finally.
we can fast forward our way to that.
Yeah.
But well, I don't know. I was over at Tommy Lee's house a couple of months back doing an interview with his lovely wife on her podcast, and he was out golfing. So I guess he's figured out a way to stay busy during COVID.
Tommy and Vince have always golfed. They took me out one time, and I was never invited again. So I don't know what that means.
It means you were too slow.
I was too slow.
Or too good. Maybe you were too good.
Sometimes I think I'm too, to be honest with you, it was my first time. I think I was probably too good.
So you grow up in a very troubled, broken family. Let's kind of talk about just how broken down your family of origin was.
Well, Adam, it's interesting because I got a lot of messages from my mother about my father, and then my mother kind of disappeared, and I was raised by my grandparents. And, it's like a lot of my childhood wasn't like, I wasn't mad at my mom and dad for abandoning me and leaving me. It really came up in my later years of my teenage years. But I spent a lot of time fishing and hunting and working on farms and, discovering music and a lot of the positive stuff that I wanted to really get into this book. But the really important thing was I carried around a lot of anger at my dad because my mom told me things about him that weren't 100% true. Now, whether she was doing that, she thinks to protect me or maybe to make herself look better, we'll never really know because she's passed at this point as well. So, I got to go back and talk to family members and hear things. And it got me to write this story a little bit more in a helicopter view instead of like in the weeds, like a tank and just in it and fighting it and blaming and he did this and she did that. It was like, okay, why did these things happen? Why did these things happen?
Did you reconnect with your dad later on?
No, we never did.
So he never got to experience your success?
No, we never got that. I've heard that he knew that I was playing music, but he died in 1976. And I was starting to really cook in the late 70s in LA. Had a band called London, which is really documented in this book. And that band, everybody believed, was the next big band out of LA. There was a Van Halen. They'd come and gone, changed music forever. You had Quiet Riot. They had two records out in Japan, but they weren't quite doing it. Randy Rhoads went on to join Ozzy Osbourne, and that launched Ozzy's solo career. And then there was London, my band. We had a singer with a 5-octave range named Nigel Benjamin that was replaced Ian Hunter in Mott the Hoople. So they were called Mott, and they put out a couple albums. And so we had him, and we were a cross between Queen, Bowie, and T-Rex. And no record company would touch us. Would touch us at all.
Rhoads died, right, on the road with Ozzy in that bizarre plane crash thing? That was a crazy story. Do you know, can you drill down on that a little?
I don't know much about that. I wasn't there. And Rudy Sarzo, who's a really good friend of mine, was the bass player with them and was on the road at the time. We've talked about it loosely. I think it's very painful for a lot of people. Randy was as important as a guitar player as Eddie Van Halen. He just didn't have as much time in the saddle because, this accident happened. But what a sweet guy. I got to spend a lot of time with Randy before he left and joined Ozzy. And, I would go over to his house and he would show me stuff. And at that point, he was a music teacher. even when he was super young. He was so talented, such a sweet guy. But I got to surround myself with a lot of these great guys in the 70s, and it really inspired me. But I never got to, never really popped where my dad got to hear about it. My mom, would hear stuff, but I think they were still on the, well, I can't wait till he gets this out of his bloodstream type thing,
Yeah, I think the Randy Rhoads story was Ozzy was like in the tour bus sleeping or something. Randy got in a small aircraft with some pilot, and they were trying to buzz the tour bus. I think I remember it on one of those behind the music things or something.
Yeah.
And literally just crashed it, maybe even hit the tour bus and crashed, and he passed.
Horrible.
So your mom, she died in what year?
My mom passed away about 6 years ago.
So she was definitely around long enough to experience the whole Motley Crue phenomenon.
Oh, yeah.
But did she ever talk to you about it? I mean, did she ever acknowledge it? Was she standing at a distance? How did that relationship work?
We had a hard time mending our fences. My mom, especially as I got into really like diving into my past, started finding out there's so many discrepancies that I would, talk to my mom about it. And she would say, I never said that, or that isn't. And I'd be like, you just told me that last week.
Right.
And just a lot of stuff. So, instead of going at my mom in the book, I really got an opportunity to talk about, things like my mom dated Richard Pryor in the 60s. And that was a really impactful time for me, because Richard would come around and he was always like down on his hands and knees and playing with me and joking around with me. And he hadn't popped yet, but my mom got fired because of that relationship. She was a card dealer, so you're not supposed to date the entertainers, but also it was an interracial relationship in 1964, 1965 in Lake Tahoe, and it was probably frowned upon. And so I got to spend time with Richard, and then she ended up marrying a guy named Bernie Comer, who was this trumpet player and pianist for Frank Sinatra. And, so I got to be around the entertainment, around the sound checks, around the stuff, but I hadn't got the bug yet. But it was like later in life, I remember being like, wow, I was like at sound check with like Frank Sinatra up on stage, like running through some standards. I didn't know. I was just a kid playing in the aisle. Right. Kicking a baseball. Frank was probably like, whose damn kid is this?
So she was at Caesars Tahoe.
Yeah.
And I don't know if everyone knows, but a lot of acts would go there. Yeah. Many big acts would go there. As a matter of fact, I have some sort of vague memory of Sinatra's kid getting kidnapped, and I think he may have gotten kidnapped out of Tahoe or Caesars in Tahoe. Chris, you can I'll ask my producer to look that one up, but
no mob relation there.
Yeah, that it's a crazy story, but so your mom worked there. She worked there as a car dealer?
Yeah, car dealer.
And so Richard Pryor would have been an act, and Sinatra would have been an act, but this was before Richard Pryor was Richard Pryor, but they still had acts and comedians, and some you knew and some you didn't know. And your mom struck up a relationship. Did your mom and dad have substance abuse issues?
My mom told me my dad was an alcoholic. And a drug addict, which I don't know what that looked like in the 60s. What did that really mean? I was born in 1958, so we're talking early 60s, like 62. In talking to my family members, they told me that's not true. And that kind of blew my mind, because I told everybody all the time. They asked me about my dad. I'm like, it's like, this is my dad. He's kind of a bad dude. He abandoned me. He left me for no reason. And later to find out, there were reasons. My mom was difficult. They've said in the family that my mom left home at 13 years old. She showed up pregnant at 17 with my dad. This is 1950. I was born in December of 1958. I mean, that's some pretty intense family stress.
Yeah.
And I was born to that. And then 11 months later, my sister Lisa was born with Down syndrome. And I was told by my mom that the hospital the hospital said my sister wouldn't live 6 days, so she needed to go to a home. And so my sister was taken to this home where they take care of kids. It was a family too. I mean, I know the family now. I found the family. I've made communication. And that my dad just left. Well, the truth is, I found out in the writing of this book, Adam, is that my dad, being super proud Sicilian, wanted to name me after him. And that was just kind of the way of, my dad was the first Italian from Italian immigrants that he was born in America and that spoke English. Mm-hmm. And it was a proud moment when he had me. My mom told me a lot of stories about my birth and how she wanted to call me Michael and she wanted this and my dad. So I'm always having all this information about my dad. And then I find out that my dad was the one that wanted to bring my sister Lisa home and care for her. For 11 months, my dad and my mom took care of my sister with severe Down syndrome and me as a toddler and tried to work. And then in the book, we find out something happened. And it all coincides with when my sister did have to go to a facility and my dad left. And kind of, I never really said it because I don't have proof, but it feels to me like my dad didn't want my sister to go there. And when she did go, he had enough of my mom and he split. Fortunately, he left somebody behind, so that's something I had to deal with.
Your dad died young. I'm guessing if he died in 1976, I think you said. What did he die of?
He was 60.
Wow.
Yeah, had so it was like right around my age. Right. Interesting, right? But this whole book's been quite cathartic, to be honest with you, and it's a real positive book. What I really enjoy about the book is that I feel like I changed my name to Nikki Sixx is, for a stage name, but also for the rest of my life. There were a lot of reasons behind it, mostly running from my past. But the idea of Frank, is not unlike so many people, small and big towns, dreamers. And they have ideas, all these people, you had ideas. I know at some point something happened to you and you saw comedy and you were like, that's my home. I felt like, when I saw music, I was like, that's me.
Well, how old were you when you came out? And by the way, Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped in 1963, so probably would have been on your mom's watch. But was he kidnapped from Tahoe? I remember Tahoe. He was kidnapped from Caesars Tahoe or just from Tahoe?
It was out of his hotel room in Lake Tahoe. Let me see.
Yeah, so in Tahoe, right around, your mom may have been dealing cards up the street when he was kidnapped in 1963.
I was there.
You were 5.
I was there.
Oh,
I saw it go down.
He was kidnapped from Harrah's?
Harrah's Club Lodge.
Oh, yeah. Harrah's, yeah. My mom worked there too.
Well, maybe she was in on this. I mean,
she might have been in on it. Who knows? Maybe that's what broke up my mom and dad.
But yeah, kidnapped, thrown in a trunk. There's a whole story.
That's horrible.
I think they made a movie about it, actually. It was just a bumbling caper, but let's not digress. You came to L.A. at what age?
17 years old on a Greyhound bus with a guitar. And an idea.
Did you have anywhere to go? Did you have a number, someone to talk to?
So I talk in this book about luck. I feel a lot of books that we read about people's lives, they don't really discuss luck enough. They talk about, maybe their childhood a little bit and they start playing and then one day like they're the biggest band in the world.
Right.
And I had a stroke of luck by my uncle, who was Don Zimmerman, who was the president of Capitol Records. He was married to my mom's sister, Sharon. And I would see Don and Sharon all the time. And sometimes they would come up and visit us in Idaho. And Don was always sending me all these records, because my grandparents were saying he is like in his bedroom spinning records nonstop. So he started sending me Beatles records, Stevie Miller, Wings, which is still one of my favorite bands. You know, a lot of people are like, Beatles or Wings? And I'm like, I'm going to get in trouble here. I really think Wings were something special, especially at that time around Band on the Run. But anyway, they came up to visit, and he saw in me, I had a guitar. And he said, if you ever want to come down to LA and, stay for a little bit and come down and, and stay in the guest room. So I took a Greyhound bus down there. They picked me up and they moved me into this. I mean, I'd never seen a house like this. We lived in a trailer. So there's like, this house didn't have a screen door on it. That's the first thing I noticed, like, wow, no flies. And they had a really nice family, and he helped me get a job at a place called Music Plus. You remember those?
Yeah.
Yep. And I worked at Music Plus out in Glendale, California, and let me borrow his truck. And so this is in the 1976, maybe. And I, would be in there like Adam, I'd be in there playing guitar, and he'd come home from work. I'd hear his car pull up, and I'd run out and I'd be like, hey, were the guys in suite in the office today? Like, can I talk to Paul McCartney? I was so young and so green right off the farm. I just thought, wow, I could meet all these cool people he'd been sending me records to. Eventually, I moved out. I was a little bit too much for the mom and dad were a happy family, and started doing my own thing. But Don was always in the shadows. And when my band London was peaking in Los Angeles, doing like 4 sold out nights in a row, the talk of the town. I remember one day I said to my band, I said, listen, I want to tell you who's coming to see us on Saturday. And they said, who? And I said, my uncle. And they were like, so?
Is this like Whiskey, Gazzarri's,
Starwood?
Starwood.
You ever go to Starwood?
Yeah.
Starwood was rad. I go, he's the president of Capitol Records. They go, why did you never tell us? I go, because we weren't ready. And he came and he saw us, and it was one of those nights where you just knew you were on. I mean, I know you've had those nights on stage. You're like, that was everything lined up. And it's hard to replicate that. And he said, call me tomorrow. So like, I remember calling my grandparents back in Idaho and woke them up and said, Don came and saw us, and this is it. We're going to get a record deal, blah, blah, blah. And I called him the next day, and he just said, I'm sorry, but this is, we don't see it. Wow. We don't see it. And I was shocked because he didn't see it. The singer quit, who was really this guy who was like a Freddie Mercury. I mean, he had this voice that separated us from everybody else. And because he quit, I had no choice but to start again. And because I started again, Motley Crue happened. I met Tommy, Vince, and Mick, and that's purely like luck, luck.
How old were you when this happened? When the singer quit?
I was just 20. I think I just turned 21. And that's when I changed my name right after that.
Were you angry at your uncle? I mean, there's a few ways one can take this kind of news, especially the letdown. You had a great night. Yeah, everyone who's been on stage knows the difference between good nights and bad nights, and it was a good night. And he's the head of Capitol Records, which is the biggest game in town at that time. And he's your uncle, and he's telling you, I don't see it.
Yeah.
You can be angry at him.
Yeah.
Or you can kind of internalize, or you can say he doesn't know what he's talking about, or you can say he's only doing this because he's my uncle and he doesn't want to show nepotism. Like, how does a 20-year-old digest that information?
I found in the book that there's a pattern for me, which is a kind of never say die type pattern, which I realized I learned from my grandfather. He got up at 5 a.m. He went to work, worked at a gas station. He was a mechanic. He came home at 7, 8 o'clock at night, still made time for me, took me fishing, took me hunting, watched me play football. And I just learned that like you work hard and you never complain. You just never complain. So I remember going to band rehearsal and I go, look, I got great news and I got some bad news. And the guitar player is like, well, give me the great news first. And I said, okay. And then the singer, Nigel, goes, give me the bad news. And I go, well, okay. The bad news is they passed on the band. But the good news is we're the same band. We're still on fire. We still got the look. We still got the songs. We still got the name. We got it all. He goes, well, guess what? And I said, what? And he goes, I quit.
Right.
But he wasn't able to have that fortitude to say, let's keep going. He knew what we had, but he was in it for a different reason than I was. And I wasn't mad at my uncle. It's not show family, it's show business. And, how do you go sit down in the boardroom and go, hey, I'm going to sign my nephew who's in the type of band that no one's signing right now. No one's signing a rock band at that point. They're signing the Knack.
Right.
They're signing the Plimsolls. They're signing the Go-Go's. Right. They wanted hand claps and flock of seagulls haircuts. They didn't want long shags and guitar solos. And so I formed Motley Crue and I called him again. And I said, I got this one. This one, you're going to like this one. And he came down and he passed again.
How long after that? I mean, first pass.
I formed Motley Crue 3 months after London broke up, right after I changed my name.
And how soon did he come out and see you guys?
We were playing Santa Monica Civic, Glendale Civic, Pasadena Civic. We went from zero to bam in less than a year. So it was in that first year. And he said he didn't see it. Now, years later, we were spending time together and he's like, you were writing songs in my guest room. You were annoying me when I came home from work. You were calling me and telling me, here's free money here. And I didn't see it. He goes, biggest mistake I made in my career was not signing you. And I said, how would you know? How would you know?
Well, did you? So I'm curious what became of the very gifted Nigel, who didn't have the intestinal fortitude or the work ethic you had, but had the pipes, had the God-given ability. Because I'm very interested in the people with the God-given ability versus the people with the just will that's unbreakable. Did he go on to anything?
He never really went on to do anything. Ended up, I read in construction. I read some interviews here and there. He was very bitter, bitter against the music industry, bitter against me, bitter against blah, blah. And then I read a few years ago, he passed away, which I was sorry to hear that. But you know what, man? If you quit, you get what you get. And that's life. You get what you get.
Put that on a license plate frame. If you quit, you get what you get. The book is called The First 21, How I Became Nikki Sixx, and it details the first 21 years of Nikki's life. I know you're on a tight schedule, so maybe we can reconnect and talk some more, because I feel like we barely scratched the surface of your eventful life. And happy that you and the guys are going out in 2022 for a nice big stadium tour. So maybe before you kick that off, you guys can come back and we can talk.
Why don't we do that? Let's do that.
Let's do it, Nikki Sixx. Thank you very much for joining me today. Always good to see you, my friend.
All right. Talk to you soon. Best of luck to you.
Best of luck as well. And until next time, it's Adam Carolla for Bald Bryan and Gina Grad and Nikki Sixx saying mahalo. When he was kidnapped in '63,
I was there.
You were 5.
I
was there.
Oh,
I saw it go down.
He was kidnapped from Harrah's
Club Lodge.
Oh, Harrah's, yeah. My mom worked there too.
Well, maybe she was in on this. I mean,
she might have been in on it. Who knows? Maybe that's what broke up my mom and dad.